While I worked hard to survive, my brother Trevor swiped $6,000 from my credit card, and my parents covered for him. I fought back with legal action and a secret plan. But there was one twist they never saw coming. I'm Lana, 24 years old. Growing up, I was always the one who had to work harder to get by. My parents never handed me anything, not like they did for my younger brother, Trevor. He was their golden child, getting the latest gadgets, the trips, the new car. Meanwhile, I was just trying to pay my bills, juggling two jobs, watching them spoil him. I never complained out loud, but it stung. By the time I was 23, I had resigned myself to the fact that this was how it was. I'd put in the work, get the results eventually. But the more I gave, the more I faded into the background. Trevor was the one who got the attention, who got everything, and no matter how much I did, I was still invisible. But then, one Saturday night, everything changed. I'd just come home from a 12-hour shift, exhausted. As I slumped onto my couch, I instinctively pulled up my bank account, like I did every night, to check my finances before bed. But tonight was different. I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping. There were charges on my credit cards, over $6,000. Restaurants, hotels, online shopping sprees, places I'd never been. And I knew instantly who it was. Trevor. I froze, staring at the charges on my phone. It didn't make sense. My credit cards, mine, had been used, and it wasn't me. Not a single one of those transactions was anything I'd ever buy, or anywhere I'd ever go. The anxiety hit me first, but then came the anger. Trevor had somehow gotten his hands on my credit card details, and I couldn't believe it. I didn't waste time. My fingers were shaking as I texted him. "Why are there charges on my credit cards that I didn't make? Are you seriously using my cards?" The reply came almost instantly. "What are you talking about? I haven't used your cards. You're probably just losing track of your spending." I felt my blood boil. How could he be so casual about it? I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. Instead, I opened up the app again, scrolling through the transactions. The online shopping account was one I knew well. His. And then there was the hotel booking, one that was linked to his best friend's name. It all made sense. It was him. I waited until morning, but the rage had only grown. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stormed into the living room where Trevor was playing video games, headphones on, completely oblivious to the world. I marched up to him, my phone in hand, shaking with anger. "Trevor," I said, my voice tight. "Why are there over $6,000 in charges on my credit cards? Did you steal my card info?" He paused the game, eyes widening for just a moment, before quickly returning to his usual cocky grin. "What? Me? No way. You're probably just losing track of your spending, Lana." He shrugged, not even looking at me. I felt my fist clench. "Cut the crap," I snapped. "This is fraud, and I'm reporting it." Trevor barely cared. He leaned back on the couch, letting out a dramatic sigh, as if I was the one making a big deal out of nothing. "Why do you always have to make me look bad? You're just overreacting." I was beyond furious. His complete lack of remorse was infuriating. But what hurt more was the realization that this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. He'd gotten away with so much before, and now he was pushing his luck again. But this time, I wasn't going to let him off the hook. The next morning, I called the bank and reported the fraud. They froze my cards, but I knew it wasn't enough. I couldn't let Trevor get away with this again. Later, my mom called me. Her voice was unnervingly calm. "We need to talk about this credit card situation," she said. I agreed to come over, hoping maybe they'd finally understand. But when I walked into their living room, I froze. My parents sat there, their faces full of disappointment. Trevor was on the couch, looking smug as ever. "Lana, we've talked about this," my mom said. "You need to help Trevor. He's going through a tough time." I blinked. "What? He stole from me, and you're asking me to help him?" My dad's voice was stern. "If you don't pay it off, you're cut off. No more family support." The words hit me like a punch. I stood there, stunned. "I'm done," I said quietly, my voice shaking. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. I was in a daze when I left my parents' house. The weight of their words pressed on me as I drove home, but there was something else too, a growing sense of liberation. I'd never truly felt like I mattered to them, but now it was crystal clear. Trevor had always been their priority, and I was just the one who had to make everything work behind the scenes. The following days were a blur. I stayed home, barely slept, just staring at my phone, trying to make sense of it all. My parents hadn't even reached out. They were giving me the silent treatment, expecting me to come crawling back, just like I always had. I couldn't bring myself to call them. It wasn't just the stolen money anymore. It was everything. The years of my frustrations, of being invisible, all came crashing down. Meanwhile, Trevor's life continued as if nothing had happened. He was still posting on social media, living his perfect life, surrounded by friends and luxury. He had his new car, new job, everything handed to him on a silver platter. It infuriated me. How could he not see the damage he'd caused? I kept watching, growing more and more angry with every post. I was cleaning up his mess, paying for his betrayal, and he was living his best life with no consequences. He was getting away with it again. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to walk away. I had to make him understand. I couldn't just walk away and pretend it was over. I had to do something. Trevor needed to face the truth, and if my parents couldn't see it, then I would make them. I started reaching out to people from his past, people I knew from high school, people he had wronged along the way. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about showing my parents who he really was. A manipulative, selfish person who had always used others to get ahead, never taking responsibility for his actions. At first, it felt wrong. Digging up old stories, confronting people who had once been his friends but were now angry with him. But I kept reminding myself that this wasn't just about me. This was bigger than just one fraud case. I needed to expose Trevor for what he truly was, to force my parents to see the person they were enabling. One by one, I gathered their stories. How Trevor had borrowed money from them and never paid it back. How he'd promised favors and never followed through. Some of them still had a bitter taste in their mouths, and they were more than willing to share. Every story stung. The lies, the manipulation. It was all right there, in black and white. And as I connected the dots, a sick feeling rose in my chest. My parents had been blind to this all these years. They never saw the way Trevor used them, how he'd used me. But I was done staying quiet. I was going to make them see it, whether they liked it or not. I just needed to get everything ready before I confronted them again. I had everything ready. Stories, evidence, years of frustration. This was the moment. When my mom texted me asking to meet, I knew it was time to confront them. When I walked in, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach. There they were, sitting with Trevor, who didn't even bother to look up from his phone. My parents were all too calm, as if nothing had changed. "Lana, we need to stop this," my mom said. "You're causing problems, not Trevor." I couldn't believe it. "What? He stole from me, and you're blaming me?" I asked, voice shaking. Dad cut in. "You need to stop. This isn't helping anyone." I took a deep breath. "You've been enabling him for years, always choosing him over me. I'm done." Trevor scoffed. "You're just mad because I'm doing better than you." I stepped forward. "Number, I'm mad because you've used me your entire life, and I'm done fixing your messes." The room fell silent. My parents couldn't even see it. But I could. I was done. "I'm done," I repeated, turning on my heel and walking out of their house, slamming the door behind me. The silence after I left was crushing. I waited for my parents to reach out, but they didn't. Trevor's life went on as usual, carefree and perfect, while I was left in the wreckage of my family. His posts, his job, his parties, everything felt like a reminder of the unfairness. I thought about calling, about trying to fix things, but every time I did, the anger stopped me. They had chosen him, and I was done being the one who cleaned up his mess. It hurt more than I thought it would. They'd never truly seen me, not as I was. But the anger didn't go away. It fueled me. I had to make them understand the truth about Trevor. They would see eventually. I was determined. I had my plan. It wasn't about revenge. It was about making my parents face the truth. Trevor had spent his life lying, manipulating, getting away with everything, and I wasn't going to let him keep doing it. I knew my parents would never see it unless I forced them to. I started digging, talking to people from Trevor's past, people he had wronged. It wasn't pretty, borrowing money and never paying it back, using people for his own gain. I collected stories, every detail, everything that showed who he really was. When I had it all, I couldn't wait any longer. One evening, my mom reached out again. "We need to talk. Can you come over?" This time, I wasn't hopeful. I knew they wouldn't change, but I went anyway, ready to do what needed to be done. When I walked in, Trevor was there, of course, looking smug. My parents were still trying to pretend everything was fine. My mom spoke first, as expected, her voice accusing. "Lana, why are you doing this to the family? You're the one causing all this tension." I didn't hesitate. I pulled out the stories I'd gathered. "You don't get it, do you? This isn't about me being upset. It's about Trevor. The way he's used everyone around him, including you, and including me. You've never seen it. But now you will." For a moment, the room was silent. Trevor's smug grin faltered as I laid everything out. The lies, the betrayals, the manipulation, all of it. My parents couldn't look away anymore. My mom's face dropped. She looked at Trevor, then at me, her expression unreadable. My dad stood up, his face hard, but there was nothing left for them to say. I walked out without a word, my heart pounding. They couldn't undo what had been done, and I had finally let go. As I stepped out into the world, I realized something important. I didn't need them to see my worth anymore. I had done it on my own. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. The next few months were about rebuilding. I focused on work, regained my sense of control, and began seeing opportunities I hadn't noticed before. Every step away from my family felt like freedom. Meanwhile, Trevor's perfect world started to crumble. His job laid him off, and his once glamorous lifestyle fell apart. He came running to my parents for help, but this time, they couldn't bail him out. They were facing their own financial issues, the result of enabling him for years. Watching them struggle was a quiet victory. They finally saw the consequences of their actions, even if it wasn't the way I had imagined. As for me, I moved on. I didn't need them to understand anymore. I had found peace. Then, one day, my mom texted asking to meet, but I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I was free. Months passed, and my life slowly shifted into something I hadn't even realized I needed. I moved into a new apartment, started saving money, and even made new friends. The anger that had once consumed me was gone, replaced with a quiet sense of control. My parents, meanwhile, were still reeling from the mess Trevor had caused. He had burned bridges everywhere, asking for help that no one was willing to give. I didn't check up on them anymore. I didn't care what was happening in their house, and I was no longer interested in trying to fix things. But one day, I got a call. It was from a family friend who'd stayed in touch with my parents. Apparently, Trevor had spun a story, telling everyone I was the heartless one for not helping him when he needed it. It was just like him, trying to play the victim to get sympathy. My parents, of course, believed him, or at least pretended to. But here's the thing. I didn't care. It didn't matter that Trevor tried to rewrite the story. What mattered was that I was finally at peace, and he couldn't take that from me. The call came a few weeks later. It was from my mom. "Can we meet?" she asked. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had already moved on. There was nothing left to fix. Trevor had shown me the truth about my family, and I didn't need their approval anymore. I was done playing their game, and this time, it was my choice to walk away. The freedom I felt was better than any apology could ever be. I wasn't just walking away from them. I was walking into the life I had always deserved.